Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Carl.
And you're listening to Secret Sonics. Honest conversations chock full of tactical advice to help you build your dream career in music and audio.
Whether it's skill development, mixing mindsets, personal branding, or work-life balance, we talk about ways to help set yourself up for success in the ever-changing music industry.
Let's get started.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Carl.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing our little pre-call clap synchronization moment at a normal tempo. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to the first.
Yeah. Go listen to last week's episode.
That was.
Well, you don't know until now. It's just been AI Ben, but now it's real Ben. Now that I'm doing real life tempos, that was just the AI version of me doing it. So
there we go.
The real me is into fast tempos. I'm like a 130 BPM kind of guy, you know.
I think in all seriousness,
club.
I think you did actually count that down at about 130.
Really?
Yeah.
Could be. It was bum, bum, bum. Yeah, it's about 130. I always thought about like the idea of like, you know, there's like perfect pitch and then there's like perfect tempo. 116.
Oh, I'm sure. I feel like if anybody has that, it's like Nate Smith or somebody.
Yes, Nate Smith or Purdy from the Purdy Shuffle. One of those kind of guys. The upper echelon of session drummers.
Yeah.
Steve Gadd.
So good.
132. Do you find that there's like certain like rhythms that like just work better for production? I feel like there are certain rhythms that don't work as well, you know, like 93 never works as well as 92 or 94, you know? I don't know if you feel that way. Such a random tangent.
That is a random tangent, but I like it. I'll say this. I do like odd numbered tempos, but maybe it's because they're less common. I think it's purely a subjective thing. I don't think they objectively work better or worse. I think it comes down to the, you know, human experience, what we've listened to a lot of. And I know when I was doing a lot of remixing back in the mid 20-teens, especially the styles that I was working in, a lot more like chill synthwave before synthwave was like a thing, but much more like, you know, synthy poolside and classics kind of stuff. 108 always felt really good. 112 felt really good. 116 felt really good. And for whatever reason, it was always in groups of four.
Yep.
But when I would then, if I was working on a song at 112 and I just wanted a little bit more energy, bumping it up to 113 sometimes would just completely change the dynamic of it. So I will agree with you that I do feel very sensitive to tempo changes. However, Same. I don't think that there are any that will like objectively work better than others. I think for every single song, there are definitely tempos that will work best for that song. And I do feel that producers don't experiment enough with those slight variations. Like they'll pick a tempo that they start with and they just keep that tempo for the entire duration of making the song instead of thinking, oh, I wonder, now that I have more context, how would this feel 1 BPM slower or 1 BPM faster?
Something I noticed is like when I listen to podcasts at like 1.4 speed, because that's just one of the options on Google Podcasts, which I like. I just get used to like intro music for podcasts at like 1.4 speed and it sounds good. If I like slow it down, like this is a weird sounding intro music.
Should we actively slow down our intro music?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
just slow it down, baby. Nice. Okay. Well, this is completely off topic, but maybe it's kind of on topic because this episode we decided to call "Leaning into Your Quirks," or we'll probably rename it. But that was like the headline, "Leaning into Your Quirks," and we're leaning into our quirks a little bit about tempos and random stuff. Yeah, we thought it would be interesting to talk about things that make us tick and why we need to kind of double down on those things. I feel like this has like been my big lesson of Secret Sonics. Or there've been a few big lessons, but one of the big lessons was like, do your thing. Because if you're trying to do someone else's thing, you're going to just do a bad version of that other person's thing. Versus when you do your thing as well as you can, then no one else is going to be able to do that because it's you. Even if I'm not as good of a bass player as, Joe Dart, I could still be the best Ben Wallach bass player, right? Even if I'm not as good of a mixer as Carl Bonner, I could still be the best Ben Wallach mixer, right? Because I'm leaning into the things that I do and the things that move me. And then hopefully my taste attracts the right artists to work with me. So that's kind of like the preface of what we're going to talk about. What do you think, Carl?
I agree. And
I get over to you.
I want to hit it right back to you. And I want to ask you, what do you think some of your quirks are musically?
What are some of my quirks? Well, I like, no surprises here. I like a big bass. I want to hear the bass. I think for me, growing up as a bass player, not necessarily hearing bass parts in songs was would drive me nuts. And then when I found like Motown, and it's like, oh, this bass is like the whole record, that really resonated with me. And also like Beatles and stuff where like, like in Sgt. Pepper's, they recorded Paul's bass last. So it's kind of like above all the other things in the tape. So that's definitely something that speaks to me. And as like a bass player, I always wanted to hear the bass. I remember I spoke with another mixer on the show, Shahar Busani, a while back, also a bass player and also just like obsessed with like making sure everyone could hear the bass at all times. So sometimes that's hurt me. And like I'll even go the other direction because I'm like too conscious of like if maybe the bass is too loud. But I'm always trying to, if I can, and it's genre appropriate, I'm always trying to get the bass to sound nice and full no matter what. That's kind of something that I'm always leaning into. And also in my productions, I'm always leaning into the bass because I'm most comfortable there. So the bass will often be the trigger for whatever comes next as a creative idea. Like I'll record bass pretty early on in a production in order to kind of guide things and change the momentum because it's just where I can lean hardest and make the most positive impact, I think, sometimes on a record.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my biggest quirk. But there's other ones also, but that might take a long time.
Well, yeah, I want to say, like, I think what's interesting, and maybe this is a slightly better way to frame this conversation, is instead of just like figuring out what our quirks are and just saying lean into your quirks, which is still kind of like a fairly ambiguous thing to tell somebody. But what I'm curious about is kind of what you already said in there, where you were saying these are my tendencies. This is a tendency that I have to make the bass fairly prominent. I want it to be heard. I want it to be appropriate, but like make sure that its voice is heard. But then you were also talking about how that actually informs and influences what you do. So it's not just your quirk, but it's also the application of that quirk, right? And that also, I'm sure, affects what kind of music you're drawn to working on as well. Not just in general, but also probably like certain artists or certain songs that come across your desk. You're like, oh, I feel like I'm in my zone because the quirks that are kind of natural to me, they're encouraged to come out here. And I think they work really well. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm definitely drawn to bass-heavy music. So, like, if it's pop music, it's more likely to be something along the lines of, like, I don't know, that Charlie Puth song, Attention, with, like, the crazy bass line, or, Uptown Funk, or, I don't know, even something like the Dua Lipa stuff with, like, the heavy disco bass or whatever. And if not pop music, sure. Yeah. Like, some of the Jacob Collier stuff, which just has, like, massive low end, that would, that draws my ear. I'm like, oh, that's it. The Pinot style thing, like that voodoo kind of bass line, that stuff totally will zone me in, How about you, Carl? What's like the first quirk you'd want to share with the audience? And maybe you could get deep about like what it does for you.
I guess, where do we draw the line between quirks and tendencies? Or are they synonymous?
I think they're synonymous. Unless it's like a quirky thing. Unless it's like not a tendency, it's just weird.
Yeah.
Like maybe the bass isn't weird, but like I feel like most people don't listen to the bass the way I listen to the bass.
Well, it's not weird. It doesn't have to be weird, but it is something that you've identified and is not a commonality between all producers or all mix engineers.
Well, your quirk could be quirky and maybe different.
I think one of the things that I'm really drawn to and I really love doing, I'm a huge fan of contrast in songs and in mixes, and specifically like momentary contrast, like moment to moment contrast, not just like quiet versus big loud choruses. I mean, like even within, a quarter note's gap of time, having contrast and things in there. And one of the ways that I think that really comes out in my mixing decisions is I do a lot of automation on my effects sends, specifically a lot of automating the volume all the way out. Like I feel weird saying like a mute automation because it's automating the mute function. So it's kind of one of those things where the
volume of like the FX output or whatever.
Yeah. So I'm not, so like, especially in like that little moment, like the little quarter note, eighth note, whatever, before a big chorus, like if I want that big chorus to sound full, I need to make that moment before it sound really empty. If I want it to sound wide, I have to make that moment before it sound really narrow. If I want it to sound big and deep and tall, then I need to make that moment before it kind of like smaller and more centralized. If I want it to sound really like a lot of depth and a lot of character, then I want to make sure that the moment before it has very little depth and character. So you could call it a quirk, you could call it a tendency, you could call it an unhealthy obsession, but that's definitely something that I do a lot of in mixes, and even just automating the width of a mix, not like adding width to it necessarily, but like having whole sections be just bringing the outside borders in a little bit, so that way when it gets to the big courses, it feels like it gets bigger, because it gets bigger. Like little things like that, where I really want there to be a lot of things that, catch the listeners off guard. And a lot of times that can come through as little ear candy pieces that grab your attention, but you can still have the feeling of ear candy by just adding those little moments of contrast where all of a sudden everything dries up like a vacuum for that little split second.
Do you think being a drummer has informed this quirk of yours?
I'm sure.
Because you're just like constantly playing with the rhythm, and like how busy is your hi-hat, or maybe you'll just like stop playing the hi-hat for a second and just like give that some space. Maybe that, like me as a bass player, like I'm always like listening to the harmony and like the rhythm and the groove, but I don't necessarily think about the micro rhythmic things that you do, right? Because like your background might like inform that.
I think you're on the right track for me, but I think it's actually less about my experience as a drummer and more about my experience like in college as an orchestral percussionist, because my degree was in orchestral percussion, so like a lot of like timpani, marimba, triangle, that kind of stuff. But and if you've done any of that style of music, any kind of like concert band music or orchestra music, there's a lot of resting. There's a lot of waiting your turn and a lot of space. And I think because of that, you grow to have a real deep appreciation for the way that all of the little pieces kind of interlock, and like knowing that if you hit the big concert bass drum, big 40-inch concert bass drum every 4 measures, it's going to get old real quick. But if you save that for that one big moment towards the end, it is going to give everybody chills. And I think that is, I would say most of my mixing decisions are informed by being an orchestral percussionist, I think, because it makes me okay with space. It makes me okay with something happening just one time in a song, and that's okay.
I think it's also like a super newbie thing to just like always adding more. We've talked about this. I think we'll add this, and then it's going to be until the end of the song. That now that we're adding cellos, they're not going away, right? Like, but that could get a little bit boring.
So what are some other quirks that you have that maybe we could stick with another like musical quirk, but then I do want to kind of get into your personality bit.
My personality? Well, my musical quirk is I hate the solo violin. I think it's the worst instrument. I love violins. I love going to see an orchestra and hearing violins from 80 feet away, right? But when a microphone is like, I don't know, a few feet from a violin and it's just one, man, that is not the thing. It is just squeaky. I guess I'm just very like attuned to harsh frequencies. I think my hearing is sensitive to that, and I just like really don't want to hear it. And it really, for me, it's like nails on a chalkboard to hear like almost always, unless you're an amazing violinist, and even then, like I'd rather not have one violin. Cello, great. Violin, forget about it.
My 7-year-old is bringing home a violin next Tuesday.
Oh God, good luck.
Yeah, she's doing,
that is not the instrument I'm going to lead my kids towards.
Yeah. Well, that's the first thing that she could do. She's in 2nd grade, and they had a violin program, and I was like, well, I want to get her started. She was really interested in it, and I'm like, we'll do it.
That's amazing.
But I think violin, I've always said this, violin and oboe are 2 instruments that either you sound like the concertmaster of a major orchestra, or you sound like you're in middle school. There's such a, do you know what I mean? Like there's such a gap between being really good and being the best. And I feel like even in college, like people that were, they were seniors in college studying this, their whole lives, and you listen to it and no, thank you. And I feel like that's why I have such a respect for
the really good ones,
violinists and like double reed players, because it's so insanely difficult. Actually, did I ever tell you my personal hell? Like what my description of my own personal hell is?
No, but I'm starting to imagine what it might be.
Yeah. So this is my personal hell would be a 3rd grade oboe choir. Okay. So like, I'd say like 80 kids playing oboe for the first time. And the song that they're playing is Hotel California. And they're all playing Hotel California. They're in 3rd grade playing oboe for the first time, and there's 80 of them. But as the song progresses, they get through the intro, they get through the verse, and just as the first chorus is about to kick in, they all stop and they go back to the beginning. And they never actually get to the payoff of the "Welcome to the Hotel California," but like the squeaky oboe version of that. It never gets to that part. So there's also the added build up, just hoping that this time, this is going to be the time. This is it. This is the release. I'm just in purgatory. This is gonna happen, and then I'm gonna be able to. No, it's just you always think this is the time that they're gonna play the chorus and give me that resolution, and they don't.
Yeah, for a jazz guy, it would be like hearing somebody shredding electric guitar and just doing the 2 to the 5 without ever getting to the 1,
Yeah,
or something like that. That would probably be less of our hell. That 2-5 is actually kind of a cool progression. That's like the funk progression.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think I'd rather have a 2-5 guitarist than 80 oboe children. But to each their own.
To each their own. That's a very specific hell.
It is, and it hasn't changed.
Quirky. It's quirky. It's quirky as hell. So we're getting weird here.
We are getting weird, but I think that's something that when it comes to our quirks, yes, our quirks are going to come out in our music and our musical choices, but I think also, especially as professionals, they're going to come out in the way that we handle client interactions. They're going to handle the way that we build the relationships with the people that hire us and trust us with their music. So I think one of my quirks in that sense is my fearlessness for just telling a dumb story like that. I know that's ridiculous, and I feel like if there are any therapists listening, they're probably like, this guy should talk about that with his therapist on Tuesday. But I think that's something that for the right clients, ideal clients for me, are going to find those kind of things endearing, right?
Right.
So quirks aren't necessarily just something musical, and they're not just something irrelevant, right? It's if we can figure out which of the quirks that we have are going to be endearing or useful or interesting or a really great icebreaker for potential clients, then they can also be your superpower.
Hey everyone, friend of the podcast and Grammy-nominated engineer/mixer Travis Ferrance hosts Progressions, Success in the Music Industry.
It's a podcast exploring creativity, productivity, and growth in music. Travis has set out to document his own journey and bring those valuable lessons to you to apply to your own career.
Join in each week for conversations with some of the industry's best and brightest about the mindsets and strategies that they use in their careers every day.
Whether you're feeling stuck, digging for inspiration, or just looking for a mix tip, Progressions is probably for you.
Go check it out wherever you get your podcasts or click the link in the show notes.
So what are some quirks about you that you're aware of?
I was just my brain was well, because I hate violin and I hate harsh frequencies, that made me kind of be too hard at eliminating harsh frequencies at a certain point in my career. And now I do that less and whatever. But that's a whole other musical side tangent. But I don't know. I think people always like hanging with me, and but that's is that quirky? I don't know. I think that's, I mean, I think my superpower as a person, as a producer mixer, is people like spending time with me. I think people don't, detest me like some potential other audio engineers, and I think just me being a people person.
But I think that's okay. So you're a people person, but that's what I'm curious about.
So why am I a people person? So now we're going to go into therapy. I'm the oldest child. I've always been a bit of a people pleaser, for sure, no doubt about it. And that's definitely something that is also a weak spot for me, right? Being a people person. But it's also been one of the great things that has carried me through my life of being a people person. Trying to please people has enabled me to foster friendships and be a trustworthy person to, if you hire me, that I'm not going to just let things slip through my hands because I care too much and I'm too afraid of you, I don't know, hating me if I don't, So it definitely has helped me become a professional person and take on these adult responsibilities in in a very effective way, even if it's not always a healthy way for my anxiety. If that makes sense.
Yeah, but I guess like, but
is that
so
quirky? Is that, I don't know.
Well,
are we getting into quirky territory?
What I want to figure out is like, well, what, not like, why are you that way? It's more a matter of like, why, what about you? What about hanging out with you? What about talking with you? What about collaborating with you it draws people in?
Yeah, I think being that kind of people pleaser, people person thing enables me to be more empathetic, or at least come off as more empathetic. I mean, I think I am empathetic, and that helps everything. That helps people open up to me, helps them open up when they're singing, know that I'm here and I have their back, and they're not, if I'm recording a vocalist, that they don't need to be ashamed of, we're here, like we're doing that, like I'm on the support team. I think that it all is tied in. So in many senses, my like quirk of being a people person and be a people pleaser really has helped me in like everything I've done, as like a professional's audio music service provider,
and
like,
as a friend too.
And as a friend.
And
yeah.
as a podcast host.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I always felt it was weird, but people always felt very comfortable opening up to me on this podcast. When I used to have guests on all the time, I'd be like, why is this person opening up to me?
Yeah.
And this is something that I've had my whole life. I would go on like an airplane ride, and like I'd be sitting next to some random person and they would tell me their life story. Like that's just been the story of my life. Like people just talk to me and confide in me. It's a bizarre gift, but it definitely has its uses, and it's
from the other side, I'll say that like that's exactly how I felt. The very first time that I was on the show, it was weird how comfortable I felt.
Really?
Because it was also one of the very first podcasts I was ever interviewed on, I think.
Really?
And I just felt super comfortable talking with you. And that's never changed. It's not like you put on a really, you put on a happy face for that hour and a half that we talked. It was like, no, that's just you. And I think when we think of quirk, we think of something extreme and something very weird. Like, oh, my quirk is that my left pinky is 3 feet long. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be just something that isn't as common as we wish, And I think your level of empathy and your level of your desire to understand the person that you're talking with, it runs deep in you. And I think that's also something that not enough people have.
Yeah.
But it is something that people want to be around. They want to be around people that care. And I'm sure some people want that from a selfish perspective, but I think also just as humans, we want to be around other people that care, especially the people that they themselves care deeply about things and they're empathetic.
Yeah. And maybe they're even feeling insecure about the song that they wrote and they don't know if it's going to meet the standard that they think they need to meet or whatever. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. This has been a therapy session for Ben now. How about you, Carl? Tell me a little bit about maybe the quirks that have helped you as like a person providing services and being a professional and doing this thing that we do.
I mean, I'd say probably my practiced fearlessness of just like starting conversations. My practiced extroversion definitely does not come naturally to me. Maybe you could say like a quirk about me is the fact that I understood and was willing to try to figure out how to do that because I knew it would be in my best interest, not just in my best interest as a business owner, but in my best interest as a creative and a collaborator and somebody that wants to meet cool people. Because what I've found is that not a lot of people want to do that. It seems like people are either, I don't fully believe this, but I'm going to say it. Like, it seems like a lot of people are either born fearless or they're born fearful in certain things. And I actively...
Nature or nurture?
Nature or nurture, and I'm trying to...
It could go either way.
I'm trying to actively get over some of those fears, but not all of them. Like, I'm still pretty terrified of heights. I was at Sky Zone, which is like a little trampoline park nearby, for a friend's daughter's birthday party, and I took my oldest daughter to it, and I was like, oh man, if I jumped off this thing, it's maybe like 6 feet, 7 feet high. If I jumped off this with my camera in slow-mo, I could use this for one of my New Music Friday posts. I could just have that be like the background visual. I could not get myself to just like fall off of like a 6 or 7 foot little podium into a gigantic pit of foam. Like I knew intellectually that this is going to be totally fine, but I could just not emotionally get the courage to do it. So when I say that, I'm not saying that
Wow.
I try to tackle fears head on in all aspects of life, because I feel like that's more of a trait of somebody that was just, has a fearless personality in general, and they just want to attack those fears. I'm very much not that. I'm a very practical and tactical fear challenger, I guess. Yeah, this is definitely like another thing to talk about in therapy.
Yeah, I think if you did jump off that, or if you push yourself to do it, it could open up. I once saw like a business coach, and he told me, he's like, dude, you just got to go like skydiving or something, or like do a crazy zip line. Like people that do these things, they just have crazy breakthroughs. I'm like, I still haven't done that, but
yeah.
But like when you push yourself, which you have in some aspects, like you're able to work through crazy stuff, It's a good muscle to flex,
Yeah, so maybe that quirk is that I've found a way to do that in some aspects of life and absolutely not able to do it in other ways. I think maybe
we can't get it all.
Maybe it's like I've gotten over the fear of social harm and have not gotten over the fear of physical harm, even when it's irrational.
That's good. Listen, so one will actually hurt you and one won't.
Yeah, one will hurt my feelings, one will hurt my my bones.
So do you think that's like a quirk that you've like figured out? I guess it's a quirk because you're just you come off as just like totally bubbly and like not worried about what people think about you at all,
Yes, I don't know if that's a quirk or a tendency or a habit or a disorder. I don't know. I don't know what to call it. But it is something that I feel is, fairly unique. And I think that's really what we were trying to get at.
I think you're really effective at that stuff when people like myself are more afraid of leaning into being out there all the time, because it's just so nice to come back into your man cave or woman cave or whatever. And you're just constantly living on the edge, and it's helping you meet people and it's helping maintain your career because of that,
Yes, but I think also it's balanced by the fact that I live not in a music city and I work fully remotely. So I don't have to be, extroverted and do in-person sessions. I don't have to be, I'm not going out to shows every night. I'm not meeting people in person all the time. So I only have to like go into that mode when I need to go into that mode.
Right.
But it's because I know that going into that mode is going to help me to more effectively communicate the things that I'm passionate about. It's not just like, doing that and putting on my salesman hat. It's more that if I want to help move the needle on the things that I really care about and I'm really passionate about, then I need to be vocal about that. And I need to be able to get over that internal hump, because this is something that I think is really important, not just for myself, but for all the people that I work with and I meet and I teach. So I think that's, now that I'm thinking about it, that was, I think, what pushed me to push through it. Whereas me getting a cool slow-mo video was not enough to push me quite literally over the edge, to jump into that pit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get deeper with you. What about like, maybe that is deep enough because you by being out there, you're able to communicate with all those people. But is there anything else that you do that once you're working with an artist and you're working on the mix and you're, in communication, any other quirks there that kind of help you once that relationship has been established, right?
So I don't know if this is a quirk or if this is just something that I don't know many other people doing. Part of it is the way that I communicate about mix notes, and how we talked before on an episode about how I try to send them mix one at like the 80% mark, not expecting it to be perfect. But I think also the fact that I go out of my way to try to keep in touch with artists after the project, not purely from you ready to hire me again for the next song? Not like that, but also to show that I care. Like I'm excited for when the song comes out. I want to make sure that I can post about it. I want to, I want to see the artwork. I'm excited. I want to, know what's going on in your head when you're trying to promote this, because I'm genuinely interested. So again, it's not a 3-foot long pinky finger quirk, but it's definitely something that I see as being totally normal, and that's just what I do, but I don't run into other people that do it.
Yeah, I think you really are like on the money with like following up and just making sure that everybody has their song is out, they're proud of it, and you're showing that you're proud of it also. And like, it's not just like released into the ether and then you forget about it. You're there and proving to the artists that you're working with that you're part of their team. And that gives them probably a lot of confidence to push forward. And their win is your win and your win is their win. And that whole thing,
Yeah, I'm sure I thought about it like that before, but I'm thinking about myself in different ways now. This has been an interesting conversation.
This is definitely, I'm liking our kind of like meta conversations because they go in like really weird places, but they're drawing interesting new things out of each other. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot.
Hopefully people are enjoying this kind of an episode, like it's Secret Sonics is definitely morphing into something new and like kind of like the AI episode. We don't really know where it's going, but hopefully it'll go in good directions and new directions that'll help us and the listeners in different ways,
Hopefully we will do more good than harm.
I don't, well, like what kind of harm are we putting at, Take everything we say and take it either with a grain of salt or don't, or
a block of salt.
This is just, or just do the best you can with it. At the very least, hopefully it inspires you to get working and do good work and lean into your quirks like we do, or even more so than we do. Double down on yourself. Be the best you that you can be.
Yeah, go get them, Tiger.
We don't need another Serban because we already have a Serban. We need a new you. So the listener out there.
Exactly.
Go make your own waves, right?
I'm just waiting to see how many more like throw pillow motivational phrases you can you can say.
I'm done.
Ben, I love you.
Love you too, brother.
Bye, Ben.
Bye, Carl. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. If anything here resonated with you, please share this or your favorite episode with a friend.
And as always, we love to hear from our listeners. So find us on social media at Secret Sonics,
at Ben Wallach Music,
and at Carl Bonner. Until next time, bye, Ben.
Bye, Carl. That was good. I think the outro was great.